Good morning and welcome. My name is Michael Rainville and I'm the chair of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. I'm going to call to order our regular committee to verify a quorum. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Wansley.
Present.
Vita.
Present.
Ellison is absent. Osmond is absent. Goodman is absent. Jenkins is absent. Chavez.
Present.
Chutai.
Present.
Koski is absent. Palmisano.
Present.
Johnson is absent. And Chair Rainville.
Present.
You have 7 present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Our first item today is a group of contracts with Frederickson and Byron, Hilden Advocacy and Law, and Primary Group for legislation and representative services through 2024. IGR staff have also prepared conflict review reports for each firm. And this, for the audience watching, this is for our efforts at the state and federal levels, as well as some county representation. Seeing no further discussion, I'll move approval of this item.
Would you like a voice vote or roll call?
Let's have a roll call, please.
Second, if needed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Payne, I didn't see you.
Yeah, I was just curious if somebody could speak to the scope of services by the 3 groups.
Director Toplinka?
Yes, Chair Rainville and Councilmember Payne. The scope of services is providing lobbying services on behalf of the city, so legislative advocacy. For the first 2 contracts, it's with the state legislature, and for the third contract with Primacy Group, it's at the federal level. Primacy Group is based in DC, and they provide services with our congressional delegation. And then the other 2 firms we've worked with for the last couple of years and would like to continue working with them for the next year going into the next session. They have strong relationships with our Minneapolis delegation and legislators statewide, and they help us with our bonding asks and other items that are on the city's legislative agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. So we do have a second here, and let's have a roll call vote, please. And excuse me, and I just also want to recognize Councilmember Osmond and Councilmember Koski. Thank you for joining us.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye on all but 1.4.
Wansley.
Aye on all but 1.4.
Vito.
Aye.
Osmond.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye on all except 1.4.
Chutai.
Aye on all except item 1.4.
Koski.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
And Chair Rainville.
Aye.
We have 9 ayes on everything except for 1.4, which has 5 ayes and 4 nays. Thank you.
Thank you. That motion carries and the item is approved. I'll ask the clerk to file the related reports. Our next item is approving the 2024 Legislative Policy Positions document. We had a presentation from the IGR team on this document in our October IGR meeting. Council members have prepared a number of amendments in order to begin the amendment process. I'll first move approval of this legislative agenda as recommended by staff. A copy of the amendment proposed is available at the dais. And then I will recognize the author of each amendment to introduce their motion, and then we will open the floor to discussion to discuss the amendment before taking a vote. And staff from Intergovernmental Relations is available to address questions that may arise. But Director Templika, could you give just a brief summary of our legislative adjustment? Thank you.
Yes, Chair Rainville and council members. So today we are seeking approval of the 2024 legislative agenda and policy positions. Included with your RCA are two versions of the staff recommendation. One includes strike-throughs for items that were adopted by the legislature last year, and it also includes underlined and highlighted language for the new items that came through the policy liaison team process. So those are the items you received a presentation about on October 31st that staff from departments across the city enterprise recommended. Your other attachment is just a clean version incorporating those changes. As we shared with you on the 31st, there were a few things that the IGR team was continuing to work on with some of our stakeholders and partner cities that also are incorporated in the version you have before you. So I just wanted to touch on what those are. One is there is just some additional language highlighting our support for anti-displacement efforts for transit projects. And this is largely because we anticipate work moving forward on the Blue Line and want to make sure there's support from the state for anti-displacement strategies along the Blue Line and also future transit projects. We did also highlight and just called out more specifically this year some of the work that the Chief O'Hara has been doing around recruitment and retention. He was working along with Mr. Huser with Public Safety Committee members last year to try to work on some strategies that would allow us to recruit peace officers that are more reflective of our community, and we need just some new strategies to be able to do that. We have also updated the cannabis section just to reflect that adult use cannabis is now legal in Minnesota. And so we just modified that language to reflect that it's legal and that we want to continue to monitor it and make sure that the city has resources it needs to be able to implement that new state law. The open carry provision that was in the downtown work group related to Nicollet Mall is also included in the cannabis and liquor section. And then lastly, there is a new arts and culture section, and the jobs and workforce development section has been updated working with Director Bar Helgen from CPED. So that's the brief overview of what's before you, but we are happy to take questions if you have them.
Thank you, Director Toplinka. Excuse me. Does anybody have questions of the director? No? Seeing none, we'll move then into the amendments. We do have four amendments before us right now. And the first one is by myself. I have a motion to, on page 5 under section Community Safety and Public Safety Reform, amend to legislation to require that peace officers are in a separate bargaining unit than their sergeants and lieutenants. This is language intended to make this clear law. It's recommended by our attorney's office. And then that same language on page 12, which under the section ensuring that the city is safe and livable, amend to legislation to require that peace officers are in a separate bargaining unit than their sergeants and lieutenants. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, thank you. We'll go through these and take them all up at once for the vote. Motion 2 is by Chavez and Chuktai. And would either one of the authors like to speak to that?
Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Rainville. Councilor Chuktai and I are bringing a motion on page 11 under section Community Safety and Criminal Justice Reform. It's basically supporting legislation that restricts local officials from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement efforts. It's essentially sanctuary city support across the state.
Great, thank you. Any discussion on that? All right. The third motion is by Councilmember Wansley. Would you care to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Chair Rainsville. So motion 3 is seeking authority for cities to charge fees that are reasonably related to the entire cost to the city of providing the service, permit, or license. So basically, on page 11 under the section, sorry, Ashley, my bad. On page 6 under the section of local government finance, I'm looking to amend the language to reflect what I just read. Throughout the course of my term, my office has learned a lot about how fees have worked within the enterprise and how there are difficulties for the city to actually recoup all of the costs associated with various issues. These issues include vacant buildings, the social cost of climate change, as well as off-duty fees. So this amendment is also in alignment with the League of Minnesota Cities policy platform, and will allow us a pathway to recoup those entire costs. So with that, I will ask for a second unless there's any questions.
I'll second that motion. Thank you. And then we do have a fourth amendment as well, and that is also by Councilmember Wansley. Would you care to speak to that, please?
Yep, thank you, Chairman Rainville. So for motion 4, which the language is to amend to include support for policies, programs, and funding that help Hennepin County and Minneapolis prepare for the closure of the Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, also known as HERC, including source reduction, waste diversion, and more sustainable waste processing infrastructure. This would be amended on page 21 under the section State Funding and Resources for Environmental Protection. I also want to name, in addition to this legislative amendment, Councilmember Ellison and I will be bringing forward a legislative directive to Public Works next cycle that would help us begin to understand what is exactly needed for the city to be prepared for the HERC closure, which could be as early as of 2028. So this amendment language is to assure that while we are supporting Hennepin County in their efforts to close this energy center, we as a city are also advocating for funds that will need to accelerate any of the operational and policy changes that's going to be needed for a smooth transition. So if there's no questions, I will ask for a second on that motion too.
And I'll second that. Thank you, Councilmember Walmsley. I also want to make sure that there is a second for the motion by Chavez and Chuck Ty, and I will second that. You don't need it? Okay, thank you. So we have all these amendments offered, and with that, colleagues, we have completed the packet of prepared amendments. I have to open the floor to ask, is there any further amendments? Thank you. Seeing none, I will ask the clerk. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Councilmember, Chair Rainville, I did just want to mention that I am not as familiar with the state funding and resources for environmental protection in the way that Councilmember Wansley is looking to add this language to motion in her motion number 4. But I do think it's really important for the city to participate in terms of source reduction and waste diversion. And I hope we can lean into that work next term a little bit more. I think that really is some of the best ways that we can participate. We also have a huge grant from the government in order to help with things like biochar. There are other kinds of ways that we could work on where we haul our composting, recycling, and other things to help us all be better with our waste. And I want to thank Councilmember Wansley for flagging it and adding this language.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Is there any further discussion on the motion? I will ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mr. Chair, maybe we can just clarify, do you intend to move the entire policy positions document, including the amendments, or just the amendments?
No, let's do the amendments first and then the entire policy.
Fantastic, thank you.
So first the amendments, we'll have a roll call on the amendment votes.
Councilmember Payne,
Aye.
Wansley,
Aye.
Vito,
Aye.
Osman,
Aye.
Chavez,
Aye.
Trigtai,
Aye.
Koski,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
and Chair Rainville.
Aye.
We have 9 ayes.
Thank you. It passes. And then I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on all the items.
Councilmember Payne,
Aye.
Wansley,
Aye.
Vito,
Aye.
Osman,
Aye.
Chavez,
Aye.
Trigtai,
Aye.
Koski,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Chair Rainville.
Aye.
We have 9 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. So before we conclude, I do want to thank our staff for coming down. You have a lot of hard work ahead of you, and as you can see, it's an ambitious agenda, so we're asking a lot of you. And I also see many of our lobbyists in the audience too. Thank you for coming down today in case we have any answers. And again, we have high expectations, and we know that you'll work hard and represent us well, so thank you. With that, we've concluded all business to come before the committee today, and without objection, we are adjourned.